And we're back in the car on a Saturday like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this Saturday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Now, there are two big movies with anniversaries today, or celebrating anniversaries, if it's actually really a celebration. I mean, that's kind of debatable. 40 years ago today saw the release of a film that I have talked about frequently on the channel, and thus I'm not going to focus on today. But on June 7, 1985 was the release of Richard Donner's iconic The Goonies, a film which is one of a handful which defines its decade, in that case the 80s. And I've talked about also there are certain images and moments in movies of the 80s which define the decade. Michael J. Fox's Marty McFly, Back to the Future. The oiled up, shirtless, muscular saxophone player in Richard Donner produced The Lost Boys in 1987, directed by Joel Schumacher. That's another movie that defined the decade of the 80s. But when I think 90s, when I think 1990s cinema, I get the warm fuzzies because the 90s represents Hollywood at its best. And I'm not joking. I'm not trying to be snarky because I am a Gen Xer, but I believe that the 90s represents Hollywood's greatest decade. They hit the marks the best with blockbusters, and I don't mean the video store, which has gone the way of the dodo, but they hit the marks with blockbusters. They hit the marks with the mid-range indies, the Good Will Hunting type films, the English Patient, which started as an indie, an indie film and ended up taking 9 Oscars. And there are so many individual years of the 90s with more than a handful of films which, in my opinion, reached the level of masterpiece. But they also did action better than at any other time. You have filmmakers like James Cameron. You had directors and producers, in this case, who worked together. In the case of Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer, unfortunately, Bruckheimer's old partner, the late Don Simpson, passed in the middle of the decade. But on this day, 1996, saw the release of a film which defines its decade, but in a different way. It is a film that revels in its excess, that glorifies overspending, wasteful spending, whether government or Hollywood. It glorifies the kind of big, dumb action movie which was made in the 80s. But somehow, this big, dumb action movie works like a charm. And the film that I'm talking about, released on this day, 1996, I can't believe it's 29 years, is Michael Bay's legitimately spectacular action thriller, The Rock. And if it had been a couple of years later with the kind of rise of Dwayne Johnson, it would be difficult to have a movie and name it The Rock unless it just smell what The Rock is cooking, unless he was somehow in it. And then that would really be, you want to talk about meta, that would be real meta. But I got in on the ground floor with The Rock. The trailers had begun appearing early in the year, and 96, the first part of the year, the films really weren't that great, except for Fargo, which, as I talked about, was released early in the year. It should have gotten a small release in December of 95, and it would have won the big Oscars the year of Braveheart, but it's neither here nor there. But I was ready for this movie. The trailers looked great. The advance buzz in the internet existed, but it was still a somewhat dark time as far as information. Still traveled pretty slow in most instances. But I was ready for it. Big Nicolas Cage fan. Leaving Las Vegas, I thought was very depressing, and I don't want to take his Oscar away, but if you ask me which actor gave the best performance in a movie in 1995, I'm going to say Richard Dreyfuss in Mr. Holland's Opus. What can I tell you? I've got a soft spot for that film, and Dreyfuss's really wonderful three-dimensional performance. So Cage was flying high, and as I said, I liked the guy. I thought the film that he made with Bridget Fonda, which was originally titled Cop Gives Waitress, $2 million hit, but it was retitled It Could Happen to You. Really, really good. He's a fucking scream in Honeymoon in Vegas. That's one of the funniest films of the decade. Just great. I mean, he holds his own with James Caan, who is certainly could ham it up. He did with Arnold, same year, 1996, with Eraser. But I was a fan of Cage. And I adored Sir Sean Connery. I mean, who didn't? Which movie fan in the era, whether it's Gen X, because there are people under 40 where Connery kind of missed them because he retired. His last film was 2003's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. A lot of people under 40 only know him as, well, the old guy. My dad liked him in the James Bond films. But my favorite Sean Connery performance is Dr. Henry Jones Sr., Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. When Sean Connery passed in September of 2020, he was up there, he was 90. He was the same age as Clint and Robert Duvall and Gene Hackman. They're the same age. 1930 they were born, 30 or 31. When Connery passed, I didn't think of 007, his 7 films, as James Bond. I thought of Henry Jones Sr., the father of Indiana Jones, whose name, spoiler alert, is Henry Jones Jr. So with that cast, and with Ed Harris and great genre actors of the day, whether it's Tony Todd, whether it's the always fire Michael Biehn, who worked so beautifully with James Cameron a number of times, but just on John Spencer, there's an undersold, brilliant actor. You want to Google somebody, unfortunately he's passed, John Spencer. He was a TV star on LA Law who gave distinctive, memorable performances in so many movies in the 90s, whether it's The Rock, whether it was Copland the following year with Stallone and, Mr. De Niro, Ray Liotta, and most especially Presumed Innocent, the film that he did, the adaptation of Scott Turo's massive bestseller, starring Harrison Ford and also the late, great Raul Julia. And the filmmaker died a horrible death, Alan J. Pakula. He was driving on the Long Island Expressway and he got hit with something fell off of a truck. Just horrendous. I'm sorry for all the death in this episode, really, I am. But I was geeked to see The Rock. The advance buzz, as I said, was good. The trailer, I think, gives away all of the major plot beats, but since you don't really know the story, you're taking a guess. But the action, the slow motion, rapid cutting of prime Michael Bay, nobody did it better than him. And he took a lot of criticism back then. Now it's acknowledged he is a stylist, he doesn't make films like Spielberg. He doesn't make films like Scorsese. He has his own style. And Bruckheimer, as producer, you saw that style in other films of that era, such as Con Air, which were not directed by Michael Bay, with the slow motion, the rapid cutting, fireballs in the background, guns being shot in slow motion, all that stuff. Face Off, the John Woo from the next year, 1997. There's a lot of what I just said. So the truth is, there's a little bit of sadness to this particular memory. I'm sorry, another person passed. But I saw The Rock on its opening morning at the Movies at Sunrise Mall, Massapequa, which was my favorite place to see a movie when I was a kid, but also even when I had moved to Huntington, really not that bad of a drive to Massapequa. And the multiplex there, I saw so many great movies at that multiplex. Heat from the previous December, I think, was the previous film that I saw at the Movies at Sunrise Mall. So my grandpa, who would have been, he would have been 93. He would have been 93, 92 going on 93, excuse me. He was born April 12th, 1913. He was still sharp as a tack. The only kind of concession that he had made to age is the fact that his hearing really wasn't so good anymore. But other than that, the guy was still knocking off New York Times crosswords in 15 minutes. He was a fucking genius, my grandfather. So he was excited to see it. He didn't look like the sort of guy that would want a big blow, shoot 'em up, action type movie. A blow 'em up, shoot 'em up, blowing shit up real good is what I meant to say. But he wanted to see it. And 5 years prior, God bless him, Nathan Cohen, one of the all-time greats, he took me to see Terminator 2. I was in Florida, and we saw Terminator 2 on its opening day. That is top 3 most memorable times at the movie. That is an all-timer that I did get to see on the ground floor, morning screening. It was like a 9 a.m. screening in Fort Lauderdale. They wanted to see The Rock. We went to see it. And the movie, I thought, was actually a little bit better than expected, because the expectation was there was going to be a lot of shit blowing up real good. There were going to be a lot of big stunts and action sequences and maybe some CGI to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit. But the story was more cohesive, and the kind of, if you want to call it a twist, I don't know that it's really a twist, but it was sold as a twist. You go back 17 years from 1996, and you have certainly a top three most undersold great films in the career of Clint Eastwood. In this case, a movie he didn't direct. His buddy and frequent collaborator Don Siegel directed it. But in 1979, Clint Eastwood made a movie about, we think, the only successful breakout from Alcatraz. And I know Alcatraz has been in the news, not to get political, but it's been in the news. You know, the president talked about maybe reopening it. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, in this instance, I don't really care who the president is. I just don't think it's viable. They closed it for a reason. But Alcatraz is a tourist attraction now, and quite a popular one, and has certainly been a good revenue generator for the state and from a local perspective, San Francisco. In 1979, Clint Eastwood made Escape from Alcatraz, and he played a real-life historical figure named Frank Morris, who was a career criminal, but he was probably a genius. I think his IQ was in the 150 level, and that's how he was able to mastermind the breakout from Alcatraz. And the movie follows the true story pretty closely, except it goes a little bit further into, spoiler alert, it seems that the guys, they made it. Well, the twist, if you will, of The Rock is that a decades-long British agent, now, calculate this, okay? I understand it's 29 years ago, but a British secret agent type who has been imprisoned for decades is played by the original, almost the original 007. It was David Niven, if you want to get technical. In the comedic version of Casino Royale, he played James Bond. And in that movie, Woody Allen played his nephew named Jimmy. Just when I found out that Woody Allen played a character named Jimmy Bond, it would be difficult to find an actor who looked less like a Jimmy Bond than Woody Allen. But there we are, right? There we are. So the twist of The Rock. Ed Harris plays a 4-star general, like a big hitter. This would be a Norman Schwarzkopf kind of guy who feels, and this isn't the only movie of the decade that had something like this. Harrison Ford, 2 years prior in Clear and Present Danger, there was a major plot beat where a military member had been disrespected, we think, had been really disrespected, and something needed to be said about it. Well, in the world of this film, Ed Harris is Francis Hummel. Great name. Francis X. Hummel. He's tired of the lack of respect. Stop me if you've heard this before, and I don't mean that in a defamatory way, but he's tired of the lack of respect being shown to career military men, to military veterans, to people who gave their lives. It's all real. In real life, we talk about it. There's arguments, there's debates on TV, on TikTok, everywhere. Again, I'm not taking sides of the argument. Just know that it exists now, and 30 years ago, there was a lot of similar chatter. Well, something, I don't remember the exact particulars, something more serious than just theory and just two people arguing about military regulations, etc. He's angry. He takes Alcatraz, more or less takes the whole island hostage, and whoever is there on the, prison tours. And if you want to get cute, maybe Mike Myers' character of Charlie McKenzie, who takes a tour of Alcatraz in the movie So I Married an Axe Murderer, maybe he's stuck there, but we just don't see him, but he's somewhere on the island as he's there with the late Phil Hartman and Anthony LaPaglia. What a great scene in that movie. So he takes Alcatraz hostage. And you have character played by Nicolas Cage, the nominal lead of the film, with not a good name. His name is Stanley Goodspeed. Stanley Goodspeed. That's just not a good name. Fortunately, Sir Sean Connery's character's name is John Mason. That's okay. It's not Francis X. Hummel. Francis Hummel is one of the best names of any movie of the decade, in my opinion. Stanley Goodspeed is, I think it's FBI, but he's a scientist, basically. He's what Jack Ryan, or when I say he's what Jack Ryan was purported to be in The Hunt for Red October, he's somebody who's not really a field agent. He's more a man of thought than a man of action. But in the world of this film, it's an action movie, so of course, Stanley Goodspeed is going to have to get his teeth, he's going to have to kind of cut his teeth in the action arena. So when I mentioned about Connery, his character of John Mason has presumably been locked up for more than 20 years. British agent, remember this, British agent. And many critics said, if we just look at Dr. No, there is a sequence in that film where Connery's Bond is locked up. And the implication was, let's pretend that James Bond never actually got out of where he was. And now it's all this time later. They see John Mason as 007. Now, there's nothing in the movie to indicate that, but you can watch this movie and see Mason as, this is James Bond, because he has all the skill sets, even though he's a lot older. And another thing with this movie, Connery had the same look with the beard and the hair, well, more so the beard, that he had in Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. The twist is that he's the only one who can break into Alcatraz. Clint Eastwood in Escape from Alcatraz escaped. John Mason and Stanley Goodspeed need to break in order to stop what appears to be a very dastardly plot to detonate canisters of nerve gas that will kill a whole bunch of people, probably into the millions. And that's why they have to go. And Stanley Goodspeed is the brain, the science guy, and he is needed for that purpose because he is going to know or knows how to defuse what Ed Harris's Francis Hummel has commandeered, what he has taken command of. And that's really, all of that is just an excuse for Nicolas Cage to look cool, for Sean Connery to play one last great action role, and for shit to blow up real good. One thing the film does, though, that is very interesting and unexpected, we've seen movies where bad guys just start killing their own people. This isn't that sort of movie because the Ed Harris character was a legitimate patriot. This is not, he was not even a Douglas MacArthur, who was a very polarizing figure until he was relieved of his command. This guy is presented in a straightforward way. He is somebody who has served his country with honor and distinction and feels like, this is how I'm going to fall on my sword, by taking these actions to shine light on horrendous injustice, particularly towards the military. So you have his character having apparently told a story to his people, which is that we are going to take Alcatraz hostage. You guys are going to get the glory. You're going to get money or whatever it is. And we have an exit strategy. And I'm sorry, this is a bit of a spoiler. The reason why I think Ed Harris wanted to play this character in the first place is that he has a through line that makes sense. He has a through line that makes sense. And the through line is that he's not planning on detonating. He's not planning on doing that. And many of the men who are working with him think that this is real. They don't think that, in the immortal words of Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible from the same summer, this whole operation was a decoy. He's bluffing. Ed Harris is playing poker. And what he thinks is, given his standing, given the number of people on Alcatraz Island and the number of people in the surrounding area who are going to die, he believes that the feds, the federal government also, they're going to do whatever he wants. And when they don't, well, now he's really in some deep shit now, because there are a number of guys on his team that would not have signed up for what amounts to a stage play. They're play acting. They're not serious. These guys are serious, and he only meant to take it to a certain point. And there's a version of this where his character is actually fully bent. He's Dennis Hopper in Speed, who really does want to blow up that bus. Spoiler alert. He's not faking. He's not making believe. He wants to blow up that bus. So then you get into real difficult, dicey, gray area territory where you say, well, what would you do? Or Didn't he realize how difficult it was going to be? Like, there are a lot of questions. This movie, you could drive yourself nuts trying to figure shit out. There is one phenomenal subplot, though, where the reason why Mason, I think, the reason why he was locked up in the first place, not Dr. No, but in the world, it was a Dr. No or Blofeld. No, I don't even remember. But he has possession of this microfilm. Now, there's a concept people under 30 never had to use. If you're under 40, maybe you used microfilm and microfiche in school, maybe. But I'm part of the last generation that used it, and that microfiche was part of our scholastic endeavors. There's no way around it. If we were writing research papers and we were looking at the New York Times 1906, microfiche, because even by the mid-90s they had figured out how to do that, how to get it all onto microfilm. So the Mason character has this information, state secrets, probably where DB Cooper's money is, whatever it is. Some of it is comical, but he apparently knows who killed Kennedy. He knows who killed Kennedy, and it's stored in this microfilm. And this is not a spoiler. At the very end of the movie, just before the credits, Nicolas Cage says out loud, "Honey, you will not believe who killed Kennedy." My grandpa at that moment let out as big a laugh as I ever saw him let out during a movie. And he was somebody, again, he didn't look like a person who would be laughing his ass off at something like that, but man, was he giggling away. That was not what I was expecting at the very end of the movie. So The Rock ended up, not surprisingly, with the big stars and the incredible, confident production with the effects work and the high gloss of the 90s, and Cage looking so great and Connery looking great and Harris so focused and so intense in that role. You know, I didn't even think of this. The previous year, Ed Harris worked with Connery. I don't know why I didn't think of that first. They did the movie Just Cause, which is a really interesting crime thriller mystery suspense film that does not go at all the way that we expect. But in that movie, Harris plays, I don't want to say a similar character, but Ed Harris plays a Hannibal Lecter-like character. He was even asked about it in the press tour. The movie is called Just Cause. Kate Capshaw was in it, Spielberg's bride. Connery plays an esteemed legal professor and scholar who becomes convinced that a man who is on, I think, death row, the Blair Underwood character, didn't do it. And Lawrence Fishburne plays a cop who is convinced that, no offense, professor, he did do it. And the story kind of goes from there. But in the world of the film, the character who apparently holds the key to the mystery is a lunatic Lecter character played by Ed Harris. And in that movie, and Ed Harris on the press tour even joked about it. They said, well, what do you think about, do you see this as a Hannibal Lecter character? He started cracking up, and Ed Harris is not known for necessarily being that funny in interviews, but he laughed and laughed, and he said, I got to be honest with you, I don't think Hannibal Lecter would be that impressed with this guy that I'm playing. I just don't think he would be that impressed. So yeah, they had worked together. They don't share any scenes in The Rock. But Ed Harris's character makes sense, and it is a movie that is very easy to like because Cage is so sincere. He doesn't play this film. The only scene where I think he plays it like a movie star is at the beginning of the movie. There's a shot of him with his guitar, and I think he's supposed to be naked. And I don't know if it was Michael Bay, but they said Nick wanted that in there because he was in such great shape. Now, I like that. For whatever reason, somebody who is basically saying, and Denzel even talked about this, you're only young once, and you're only going to look like this for a specific amount of time. And in Denzel's case, he was talking about the fact that he got shredded for the movie The Hurricane in 1999. You're not always going to have a six-pack, sad to say. It's the realities of aging, right? Especially when you live the life of a movie star where you're flying around, you don't have enough time for fitness. But Cage just, it's 30 seconds of the movie that he asked to be put in there. They put it in there. Michael Bay, as they say, they threw him a bone. But The Rock went on to get pretty good reviews. It's about 65 to 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's streaming free on Max and other platforms if you haven't seen it. It's so much fun. I don't know anybody who doesn't like the movie. And it was an enormous box office hit in the big action movie summer with so many blockbusters of 96, where you had Mission Impossible tearing it up. Arnold's Eraser was a big hit at the box office. And it was just a really good time. It was a really good time for the movies. Dragonheart with Dennis Quaid was a big one that actually outperformed expectations. I went to the movies constantly. But getting to see that film and laugh at the goofiness with my grandfather, one of my favorite people of all time, a great memory. 29 years ago today. The Rock, released June 7, 1996, directed by Michael Bay, produced by the legendary in his own right and great Jerry Bruckheimer, starring Nicolas Cage, Sir Sean Connery, Ed Harris, Tony Todd, John Spencer, and Michael Biehn. This has been episode 554 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Saturday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then,